Hello, sports fans. It is Tuesday, October the 29th, the year 2013, and as usual, a lot to get to in the sports world, so let's get it going right now. And we are ready for week number 10 of the college football season.
10 already, huh?
Week 10 already, and once again, we are joined by Joe Spano from Sirius Satellite Radio by way of the Sports Bylines. I got that all.
Right, by way of the Sports Byline Broadcast Network. Also, you can watch me on the WPIX Morning News, the local morning news here in New York.
And you have your Notre Dame Fighting Irish shirt on.
Yes, because they are on a bit of a run, but as you so eloquently pointed out before we went on, they're beating the weak sisters of the poor, but we'll take what we can get.
You gotta beat who's on your schedule.
That's it.
You know, Joe, as I look at this week's schedule is not good. Remember we were talking about that week when they were in Fargo, North Dakota?
Yeah.
That was a bad week.
Right.
This week could be right behind it. Not a great week. There's one team that could save the week, but we'll get to them later.
So I'll be watching regular season NBA mostly, or I'll just be drinking and not watching.
You know what the problem is? 6 of the top 13 teams are off. That's not good. I mean, Alabama's off, LSU's off, Oregon's off, Stanford's off, Baylor's off, Oklahoma's off. 6 of the top teams, 6 of the top 13 are off. That means it's going to be a very slow week, which it is. I mean, it's not going to be a big week of college football. Could be the second worst week of the year.
Wow.
Yeah, I think there's one team that can save it, but we'll save them later. So without further ado, let's get to pick number 1, by the way. Now, being it's such a bad week, I want to start with a rivalry game. Here. Pick number 1, the largest outdoor cocktail party down in Jacksonville.
I love cocktail parties.
I love this game historically. I mean, I love the separation of the fans, the 50-50 on each side, all red on one side, all blue and orange on the other side. So I actually like this game. It's got a special place in my heart. Now, these two teams are not ranked this year. Georgia, minus 2.5 over Florida in Jacksonville. Georgia's 4-3. Florida's 4-3. These two teams are both going the opposite direction. I mean, they are both going in the opposite direction.
Well, they're both majorly beat up.
Yes, majorly beat up.
And basically, one of these teams is an offensive juggernaut when healthy, and one of them is a defensive juggernaut when healthy. Both of them are banged up on both sides of the ball, so they're both limited in all areas, at least in my mind.
And Florida's calling card is their defense, and now they're all banged up on defense. We know their offense is bad. Driscoll's out for the year. Murphy's running around for his life out there. They got very few playmakers. So.
Their one weapon seems to be the freshman, Fred Taylor's son.
Right, exactly.
You know, but it's hard to rely on freshmen. They're prone to making mistakes. I think, honestly, when you look at this game, the best single remaining unit on the field combined right now is probably the Georgia offense. While both of these teams are banged up, Georgia's offense can still put up points. They can't stop anybody. That factor will be mitigated by the fact that Florida cannot move the ball at all.
No, at all.
But Florida's defense, which was their calling card, and if this game happened a few weeks ago before that Florida defense was all banged up, I might give them a chance to stop Georgia. I don't know how effective they're going to be in stopping Georgia. So for my thought process, I like Georgia. I won't say big because they're both so banged up, but I think they have the clear best unit on the field at any time their offense. So I like Georgia to cover this number pretty comfortably.
I agree totally. I am taking Georgia minus 2.5 here. Georgia actually leads the all-time series 49-40-2. I was surprised about that because for a long period of time...
Well, you remember that run where Florida won every year.
Every single year for it seemed like 20 straight years. Now, Georgia's won the last 2. I'm right on board with you. I think the Georgia offense is the difference, and I think Murray over Murphy wins this game. That's how I see it. Very simply put, Murray over Murphy. I think Georgia wins. They make it 3 in a row over Florida. Both teams, though, really, really struggling. Both teams have lost 2 in a row. Both teams look very bad. I mean,
both teams are not bowl eligible, while Duke is.
Right, Duke off their big win against Vatech, which hurts Florida State, by the way, in the polls. We'll get to that later. Terrible loss by Vatech at home in Blacksburg. You can't lose to Duke. I mean, what was that, the first time in like 100 years Duke's won against a ranked team?
It's the first time ever that Duke has been bowl eligible 2 years in a row.
2 years in a row. That's
Take that for what it is.
And it was like their first road win against like a certain number of team. Like, you know,
Right.
like how many?
Yeah, exactly. David Cutcliffe won't be long for Duke.
Right.
You know, this is his second go-around as a head coach, and you can see he's doing some very good things that were never done before.
No, they thought it was
at
impossible
Duke.
to do that.
Right.
They thought it was impossible.
So when you do the impossible in a program like Duke that has a definite ceiling, other programs come a-calling, and when the right program comes a-calling, you have to go, unless you decide you're going to be content to be the king of the kingdom.
Right.
And the king of the kingdom at Duke is probably going to win 6 or 7 games a year every year and nothing much more than that.
No, absolutely. I actually have a friend that lives in Durham, and he goes to all the Duke football games and basketball games and all that kind of stuff. He wants me to get down there for a Duke basketball game.
Oh, you have to get down.
Yeah.
Cameron Indoor is incredible.
Now, you've been there. How many times
Yes.
have you been there?
About 4 times.
Oh, so you...
Yeah, I've been there. It's incredible unless you're actually trying to call the game and miles up in the air, but that's a story for another day.
But you enjoyed your time there.
Yeah.
Who would you see? Did you see them against North Carolina?
I saw them against North Carolina once, and I saw them against Maryland once.
So all their big rivals.
Yes, it was all ACC in-conference type stuff.
Did you drive down or did you fly down?
I drove down.
You did drive down.
I drove
There
down.
you go. As with you, as always, we start talking Georgia-Florida football.
And we've now hit Duke.
Duke, Maryland, Duke, North Carolina basketball.
You never know with me. I tend to go off the page, hence the reason you have the lineup.
Right.
You can reel us back
I got to
in.
reel you back in. I got to contain you. I got
Yes,
to
because
contain you.
otherwise we'll go all over the
But
place.
we are on the same page. We like Georgia minus 2.5. Not
Absolutely.
that we love Georgia, but this is more of an anti-Florida pick.
Absolutely. Agreed.
I agree. All right, so that is pick number 1. Pick number 2, let's go to East Lansing. Number 22, Michigan State, is at home. Minus 4.5 against their arch rivals, number 21, Michigan. Michigan 6-1, had that awful loss to Penn State. A game they should have won. Had a 10-point lead with a few minutes left. Coughed that up. Then they missed 100 field goals in overtime. Blew that game. Could have lost to Akron. Almost lost to UConn. Michigan State's on a little bit of a nice run since losing to Notre Dame. Now, I don't love Michigan State, and I don't love their offense. I am going to take Michigan here, and here's why. Usually Michigan has the better of Michigan State in this rivalry. I think all time it's 68-32-5, so Michigan really dominates this year. Michigan won last year 12-10. I do not like Michigan State's offense. We saw that against Notre Dame.
It's not a very good offense.
Right. Which is why I like Michigan with the points. I'm getting 4.5, and I actually think Michigan is the better team. I actually think Michigan is
You
the better
think Michigan has the potential to win this game outright in East
Right.
Lansing?
Plus, I'm getting 4.5. I mean, so I am jumping on Michigan here. I do not like Michigan State's offense. That game against Notre Dame sticks in my mind where they could not move the ball from here to there. Yeah, they can put up 42 against Illinois and those types of teams. This is a step up. Not that Michigan's great,
And they're not.
but they're good enough to at least cover the number here against Michigan State in East Lansing.
You actually think they're probably going to win the game out?
I do. If I had to pick it even, I would pick Michigan.
Here's one where I'll go the other way.
You like
Again,
this,
we'll
you
go,
like Spotty.
Right. We'll go back to the best unit on the field. It's probably the Michigan State defense.
I can't argue with that.
Their offense may be the worst unit on the field,
Right,
however.
exactly.
Although we've seen that offense make some strides, not a lot. And let's not kid ourselves. That Michigan State offense is not a good unit. But that Michigan State defense is very
good defense.
I'm not enamored with either unit of Michigan. I think both of their units are average. And I think they're a pretty average team that's benefited from a light schedule and the fact that the Big Ten, again, is not very good.
No.
So I think at the end of the day, at home in East Lansing, I think Michigan State wins a fairly close game and finds a way to cover this number. Because the number's right around right. I think this is, somewhere between a field goal and a touchdown, and the number's right squarely in the middle. I'll take Michigan State to cover that number.
All right, so we're going to disagree on that one. All right, so we 1-1 as far as agree, disagree. Pick number 3. Number 11, Auburn. Minus 9 at Arkansas. Auburn's playing some nice football. They're 7-1. They've only lost to LSU. And Arkansas, 3-5, lost 5 straight. I mean, I am not impressed with Arkansas at all. This is one of the worst Arkansas teams I can remember.
Nothing to be impressed about thus far.
They are not good at all. And I thought the coach coming over from Wisconsin was going to do some things. I guess we got to give him some time.
Got to give him time to get a recruiting class or two in there. Brett Bielema came in kind of late.
The cover was bad.
I don't know what kind of recruiting class he was able to bring in. I don't recall it being a particularly good one.
No, the cupboard was bare when he arrived. This is a terrible Arkansas team. Last 3 games Arkansas has played. Listen to these numbers. Lost to Florida 30-10. That's hard to do. Lost to
It's hard to give up 30 points to Florida, no matter how hard you try.
Lost to South Carolina 52-7. Lost to Alabama 52-0. They've been outscored 134-17 in their last 3 games. That's good enough for me. I'm taking Auburn. I am taking Auburn -9. I think the spread is too low. This should be a double-digit
Probably
spread.
is. The only word of caution, and it won't be a factor this week, is Marshall's hurt. Nick Marshall got hurt in their last game. I haven't heard
questionable
if he's going to play.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it matters here against Arkansas.
No, I don't think so either.
The big thing for them is to get him well going forward against some of the stiffer competition on the back end of that SEC schedule. So I agree with you. I think Auburn covers this number. I think they might have a little more trouble with it than people would expect just because, number one, they're on the road. Number two, I don't know if their quarterback's going to play, and if he is, I don't know how healthy he is.
So you are going to take Auburn, though?
Yeah, I am going to take Auburn.
Reluctantly.
But I'm reluctant because I don't know if Nick Marshall's going to play, and if so, how effective
Yeah, he's listed as questionable. I'm thinking he's going to play if I was to guess, but you're right. We got to keep an eye on that.
So that's something to keep an eye on. Also because of the fact if it's borderline, it's not Alabama, so you'll rest them and hold them in again, hold them out until there's a more serious competition, as it were.
Fayetteville used to be a really tough place to play.
Well, it's still a tough place to play. The problem is that there's no talent as the opposition.
Right. The basketball is the same thing, too. It used to be a real snake pit to go into the basketball.
Oh, yeah, when Nolan Richardson was the coach, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, the bottom line is, no matter how tough a building is to play in, you've got to have personnel. Look at LSU, one of the Death Valleys. You can debate which one is the first Death Valley.
Clemson is definitely the first one.
And we can go back and forth which is the better Death Valley. When Jerry DiNardo was the coach at LSU, it was a lot easier place to play because they didn't win very many games.
Right.
So these places that are notoriously hard to play in, one of the reasons they're hard to play in is the personnel that the home team has.
Tennessee, we've seen that.
Knoxville should be a tough place to play. When they don't have any talent, it's a lot easier to play.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're in agreement, Auburn on that one. Okay. Pick number 4, number 9, Missouri.
They didn't drop that much off.
No, I was surprised. -13 against Tennessee. Missouri just had one of the worst losses you could possibly have to South Carolina.
You dominate a game for 3 quarters, you give up 17 fourth-quarter points, and you lose in overtime.
You're up 17-0 at home against South Carolina. You cough up that lead. Then in the first overtime, you're up 7, and South Carolina has a 4th and 15 that they convert for a touchdown. Right. Then in the second overtime, you have a chipperoo 24-yard field goal that you miss. That is one of the worst losses you could possibly have.
Especially when you're an undefeated team looking to run the table and go into the SEC championship undefeated against perhaps Alabama with a chance of being ranked number 1 and going to the BCS championship game. And instead you lose to a fairly underwhelming South Carolina team. All apologies. They started out with Dylan Thompson. And then Connor Shaw came back. Miraculously, he got better in-game as Dylan Thompson and South Carolina couldn't move the ball at all. Mike Davis couldn't get that running game going.
No.
All of a sudden, Connor Shaw, because he's a dual-threat option. We've talked about this with South Carolina. Dylan Thompson, when he's in there, he's the better pure throwing quarterback, but they lose their run dimension. And they just didn't have it Saturday for 3 quarters. And I'll blame a lot of that Missouri loss on Missouri. I'm not going to give Carolina much credit. Missouri coughed up this football game.
Right,
They're now ranked number 9. They head to It's in Knoxville.
No,
correct?
This is in Missouri.
This is in Columbia.
Yeah,
all right.
in Missouri.
Well, they've got to rebound. They're going to be fit to be tied.
I would think so.
I think that they are going to be an upset group. Matty Malk and company will be focused. I think Missouri Rose, Gary Pinkel will have them ready to play because you now have a week to teach lessons. See, you read your own press clippings. You believed all your hype. You had this game for the taking, and you didn't finish. go out there and finish an inferior opponent, and that's exactly what they'll do.
I agree with you totally. I also think them only dropping to number 9 is going to help here, because they're not going to feel like it's a totally lost season. They're going to feel like they can get back up there with a few breaks here and there.
It may or may not be the case, but they will feel
psychologically.
That way.
And plus they're home here, so I definitely like Missouri minus 13. Now Tennessee is 4-4, but look at what Tennessee's done on the road this year. Got drilled by Oregon 59-14. Lost to Florida 31-17 and got absolutely blown out by Alabama last week. They've been outscored 135-41 on the road.
And that's a telling stat. Right now, Butch Jones's group is far better in Knoxville than they are on the road. They keep it competitive they usually keep it competitive for most of the game at home. Sometimes they're able to pull it out. Usually they're not. On the road, it's a different story. They really struggle. Here you're going to Columbia. It'll be a good, raucous crowd. You're going to have an upset, focused team with a good head coach in Gary Pinkel who will have them ready and understanding the chance that they blew last week. They will take it out on Tennessee in a major way, and I like them to roll and cover.
No, I absolutely agree. And Alabama just pasted them last week. That game
was over at halftime.
That game was.
We saw a lot of over at halftime last week.
Alabama was an absolute blowout last week. Oregon second half was a blowout.
And that game got off to a slow start. Boy, UCLA stood still in the second half, and Oregon really took it to them both offensively and even more importantly, that defense that you don't like a lot.
No, I don't. Although I did pick Oregon. I
didn't think they were going to cover that number. They found a way to cover it. That defense that you're not enamored with, and I know it's small, but it was athletic, and it was all over the field. And for the second week in a row, Brett Hundley looks very, very mortal, and his draft stock is falling before our very eyes.
No, absolutely. So that game was a blowout. Alabama was a blowout. Florida State was a blowout. And then
there was no hangover there.
Ohio State was an even bigger blowout.
That came out of left field for me, and we've talked about that a lot on this, on our weekly visits, about the fact that Ohio State takes care of their business, but they don't blow anybody out. Tough games against Northwestern and Iowa, and fairly tough game against Wisconsin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of a sudden, Penn State comes in with Christian Hackenberg playing terrific football, and they don't stand a chance.
No.
It was over before halftime.
No, I didn't think last week was a great week of college football either. When the Oregon game, got ugly in the second half, and with the other, teams in the top 4 just blowing everyone out. I mean, you got a little drama there with the Missouri-South Carolina game. I mean, Duke, beating Virginia Tech. I didn't think it was a great week of college football.
It wasn't a vintage week, but the previous week was.
Right.
So you get a week where it's terrific, and there's nothing but great finishes and teams ranked and drama, and you're getting a little bit of everything. The next week follows it up and doesn't give you much, and that's okay. So we break it down, we take it for what it is. This week's not going to be a banner week either.
No,
but
not at all.
Next week will be.
Yes, next week. We will get to that later.
Next week is going to be lights out college football.
Yeah.
You're going to have to get in front of a bunch of televisions and spend your day from 12 noon to 12 midnight doing nothing but watching college football.
Actually, a couple of those games you're referring to, I checked the schedule. They're on Thursday, the week after. Matter of fact, I think there's a double header on Thursday that week after you're talking about. I think 2 of those big games you're referring to are on a Thursday night.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good because the Thursday night NFL game is usually pretty lousy.
Right.
So
yeah.
jump over to the college game and have some fun.
I think there's 2 big games on Thursday night. We'll get to that later. You know why? I think they want that Saturday LSU and Alabama to stand alone.
Okay.
Pretty much.
And it probably will. 3:30 CBS, 3:30 Eastern Time.
Yeah.
CBS,
appointment
viewing.
They may move that to 8 o'clock.
CBS could do that.
They did.
They
did that once before, I think. Didn't they do that last
year?
They've
done it before. Was it last year or 2 years ago?
It was
the year it was the game of the century. It was
right.
It ended up in prime time, and neither team could score a touchdown.
Right,
remember?
Exactly. So they may move that game to 8 o'clock.
Interesting watch.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that, I guess, at the back end after we get through this week.
Absolutely. All right, so we're in agreement. Missouri rolls at home in a bounce-back game. All right, pick number 5. Number 8, Clemson. And I'll tell you, Clemson hasn't dropped that far, considering Florida State just absolutely buried them. I mean...
And, we talked about that matchup and the hangover effect and which team would have it, whether it was Florida State or Clemson. I thought Florida State because, number one, their big win Number 2, going on the road. Number 3, historically, some of the trouble they've had with North Carolina State. Well, none of that applies.
No.
And Florida State blows out North Carolina State as easily as could be. Final score doesn't tell the story because they called off the dogs in the second half.
They look really good, Florida State. Really good.
Clemson struggled. It took them an awful long time to get rolling against a very banged-up Maryland group.
Yeah.
I know Randy Edsall's group is well coached, but they're very beat up. And when they come up against elite competition, they usually get blown out pretty quickly. It took Clemson a long time to get rolling, but they managed to win. They're ranked number 8, and now they take on a Virginia Cavaliers team that, even by ACC standards, is not very strong. Even in Charlottesville, I don't think this is much of a game.
Let me give you the info here.
Okay, I'm stealing your thunder.
So that's okay. You're peeking at my notes. I understand. Number 8, Clemson, -17 at Virginia. Clemson, of course, 7-1, lost to Florida State, beat Maryland, but like you said, took them a little while to get going. Virginia is 2-6. They started 2-1. They actually beat BYU this year. I don't know how in the world that happened. And since then, they have lost 5 straight. You know who they've lost to?
No, you're going to tell me.
Well, I'm going to tell you.
If you think I'm peeking at those notes, who can read that handwriting?
Exactly. I have to.
This is all up here.
Right. Here's who Virginia's lost to: Pittsburgh, who lost to Navy last week.
Yes.
Ball State.
Wow.
Maryland, Georgia Tech, and Duke. I mean, not the worst of the worst, but certainly not the greatest team.
It's not a murderer's row of college football.
No, and that's why I like Clemson here. Now, Clemson had their little hangover game last week. All right, let's get that out of the way. They struggled. They now come out and they bury Virginia early in this game. I don't think much of Virginia at all. I mean, they've lost 5 in a row.
It's a great university, just a lousy football.
Right, exactly. Great academics. We know all that. They got a great basketball arena as well. I mean, they haven't had a good basketball team since, like, Ralph Sampson, but that's a whole other story. They've had a couple decent teams, but you know what I'm saying.
They've had their moments, but generally they haven't been dominant since the days of Ralph Sampson. That's a long, long time ago.
When they lost to Chaminade, remember that? When they lost to Chaminade, believe it or not. So, yeah, I like Clemson to just roll and bury a very bad Virginia team. I think this game is over by halftime. I am going to give the 17 points. Clemson scores 50 in this game. I think it's going to be like 56-14.
You know, I'm inclined to agree, and I think you nailed it. You pretty much summed it up in a nutshell here. Virginia is just not good enough to keep up with Clemson. I don't care if this is in Charlottesville. I don't care if it's at Clemson. It doesn't matter. These two teams are on completely different levels. Clemson shook off their hangover after the devastating loss to Florida State. They're going to come out. The Fighting Dabbos will be focused and ready to roll. And as you said, this one will be over by half.
Have you ever been down to Virginia for a game?
I have not.
That is not on your list.
It's not that I wouldn't go, but it's not on the list necessarily.
They have to get better.
They don't have a storied football history that would make me need to get there.
Right, exactly. You're not going to see a team that's 2-6.
I might. I might. If it's a cool place to go, I'll go. I've gone to West Point to see Army, and they haven't exactly torn up football the last 40 years.
There's a little something different, though.
It's Army. It's West Point, yeah.
You got that great stadium with the water in the back.
Right.
And all that.
Charlottesville doesn't bring that to me. I mean, they're nice grounds and all. It's just, sorry, guys, it's not on the list.
So Virginia not on the list. So we are in agreement. Clemson rolls in this game.
See, you like to get me in trouble. Because you didn't get the email this week. They took a week off. But you'll get some next week, because if you take a look at the desk, we'll get to that in a little bit.
I did get something from the South Carolina guy. We'll get to that later.
I'm sure.
Was
it before or after the...
It was after the big win against Missouri.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we're in agreement. Clemson rolls this week. As you can see, though, it's a very light week in college football. Look at some of these games I'm talking about. These are the top 10 teams that I'm talking about here.
Just top 10 games.
I mean, this is what we're talking about here.
Yes.
Not good at all. Here we go, pick number 6 along those lines.
Oh, boy.
This
sounds like a doozy already.
Number 4, Ohio State. -30 at Purdue. Ohio State 8-0. Urban Meyer still hasn't lost at Ohio State, by the way. Purdue 1-6. Ohio State absolutely bombed Penn State. Looked really good doing it too. Purdue has lost 5 straight. Their only win was against Indiana State. Yes, the Larry Bird Indiana State team.
And it wasn't a basketball game.
No.
So take it for what it is.
Purdue's last 4 games. Let me give you some stats on them.
Okay.
They lost to Wisconsin 41-10. lost to Northern Illinois 55-24, lost to Nebraska 44-7, and lost to Michigan State 14-0. That's a grand total of 154-41. I'm taking Ohio State here. I say Ohio State scores 63 points. I'd say they win this game 63-10. I give Purdue absolutely no shot.
Well, I mean, what else can I say? I don't like the Big Ten anyway. And I don't mean I don't like them. It's just not a strong conference this year. Ohio State is far and away the class of the conference. And the truth of the matter is, Purdue's probably the doormat right now.
They could be the worst team in the Big Ten.
So you're the worst team in a top-heavy conference that's dominated by one team. The gap between these two teams is about 5 touchdowns. The spread is something less than that. I'll do the simple math. I'll lay the points. And I think I'll be pretty comfortable in saying I can cover rather easily.
No, absolutely. Purdue is an awful team. And they haven't been good in basketball recently.
No. What you're going to do is you're going to definitely see both Ohio State quarterbacks.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you might see them in the first half.
You might.
They might pull the starter after the first quarter.
I think more realistically at halftime, Braxton Miller will sit. And Guyton will come in and take over, and you'll see him for all the second half, and he'll get some work.
Purdue has absolutely no shot in this game. No shot. I mean, Ohio State scores 63 easy, I think. So we're in agreement. Ohio State rolls.
I don't think there's much to discuss there.
No. Pick number 7. Believe it or not, this is our final pick of the day. This is how.
Wow.
This is
light
how
week.
This is how light the
Look
week
at how
is.
quick. I'm going to be out of here. No overtime for me this week.
We got some notes to go
good.
through
Right.
after that. Pick number 7. Number 3, Florida State at home in Tallahassee. Minus 22 against Miami. This is where College Game Day is this week. This is the big game of the week. To me, Miami has to play well here to save the week. If Miami doesn't play well, we are going to have a lost week in college football. Now, Miami, the last 2 weeks, not good. Barely beat North Carolina. Barely beat Wake Forest. They are banged up all over the place. Injuries just all over the field for Miami. Now they go into Tallahassee, where Florida State is on an absolute rampage. Miami is walking into a snake pit here. Now, historically, Miami has the better of this rivalry, especially when the teams are equal. Miami's, I don't
think you have any such problem.
Miami has crushed Florida State's dreams in the past with the wide rights and all that. Here's the thing, though. The teams aren't equal this year. They're not even close to being equal.
The ranking might say they are, but on the eye test, I don't see it.
The point spread is 22. That's all you need to know. I mean, forget the rankings. Throw that out. We know the rankings, what they mean. I mean, the point spread is 22. Florida State destroyed Clemson. They destroyed NC State. They are now behind Oregon in the BCS. They won't be happy about that.
Well, and they shouldn't be.
Right.
You didn't do anything but take care of business.
Right.
And you lose a spot. Again, anytime a system like this, which is arbitrary, you're going to have teams that can all make a case for I'm better than this. No, I'm better than this.
Right.
It's not being settled on the field. It's being settled in a boardroom.
Florida State, after I think they win this game, they will jump Oregon. But then Oregon, if they win the week after...
Because Oregon's off.
Right. And then Oregon, they win the next week. Oregon
if they beat Stanford, then they will jump off Florida State again. And we're going to go through this all the way through.
And I think after that, after Oregon jumps them next week, I think Oregon stays ahead of them the rest of
the year.
Probably
just because of what they have left on their schedule and the fact that now the ACC championship game will probably feature an unranked Vatek,
or another rematch against Miami.
Who by then will slide down the will slide down the rankings.
No, absolutely. And that loss by Vatek to Duke really hurts Florida State because they don't have many big names on their schedule. Now, even playing Florida the last game of the year, that's not going to help them. That usually would always help them.
I guess the saving grace for Florida State is if the Pac-12 championship game features Arizona State from the South. And I don't know if they run the table and they end up in the Pac-12 championship game. I don't know where they'll be ranked. I would say at best bottom of the top 25.
They'll be in the top 25, though.
Right, so that they won't get the help that they need. It's, again, it's an arbitrary system, but as I talked to you about last week, I thought Oregon would have the advantage with the schedule, with the computers because of the schedule.
Oregon absolutely has the advantage. If both teams run the table, Oregon will finish ahead of Florida State. Now, on the flip side of that, Oregon's got to win these games. They have to beat, Stanford's and the Pac-12 and, the Oregon
Civil
State's.
War,
Right, so they have to actually go out and win these games. I mean, it all looks great on paper, and if they do that, they will stay ahead of Florida State. No doubt about it whatsoever. So Florida State is going to need some help here. They're going to need either Oregon or Alabama to lose a game. So we'll get to their schedules in a little bit, but for this particular game, I don't see any way how Miami stays close in this game. I know it's a big rival, but Florida State is on too much of a roll here. Miami's too banged up. They didn't play well against Wake Forest. They could have lost that game at home. At home in the week before, they could have lost to an awful North Carolina team. Florida State is going to dismantle Miami. I wish I could say Miami's going to hang in this game. I think Miami's got to hang in this game just to save all weekend. If we get a blowout here, you see these games.
Yeah.
We're in trouble.
This is your primetime 8 p.m. ABC matchup.
This is the best matchup of the weekend. It's a 22-point spread, and I see Florida State.
And College Game Day is going to take place in Tallahassee,
they have no other choices, and I think Florida State buries Miami here. I think they're going to absolutely just bomb them. I think they're going to win this game easily by 22 points. I definitely think Florida State covers. I think they roll over Miami.
Florida State's as good as any team in America.
I agree, and they're getting better.
I do think Alabama's the best team in the country, but Florida State's as good as any team in America.
They could give Alabama a game.
They can give anybody.
And I think, not to cut you off, I think personally Florida State is better than Oregon. But I think, like I said, Oregon will be ahead of them because of the schedule. If they both played on a neutral field, I think Florida State would beat them.
Okay, I'll let you make that case. But Florida State's as good as anybody in America. Miami has managed with smoke and mirrors to continue to stay undefeated, pulling out last-second victory after last-second victory. But in this matchup, they're outclassed.
They are.
So there's going to be no smoke and mirrors. There's going to be no pulling one out of the hat, no last-second victory. Florida State takes care of their business. They take care of it decisively, and they take care of it early. The only game where they really gave you a subpar performance was the BC game in BC. Other than that, when they're playing a team that they're vastly superior to, they go out, they take care of their business. And even teams that people think are a good match for them, they've been blowing them out as well.
No, absolutely.
There's a dominant Florida State team. Miami, as banged up as they are, just doesn't have the horses. I know they let out that big exhale now that all the NCAA stuff is off their plate.
Right.
And that may help them a little bit. And that may be something that contributed to all the trouble they had with Wake Forest. But I'm inclined to agree with you. These are two different teams as it relates to talent and health right now. I think Florida State rolls and easily covers that number, and you've jumped off of ABC by sometime in the middle of the third quarter.
No, absolutely. I mean, we are in real trouble this Saturday with our college football games.
I think we'll get to make up for it next week.
I think so. Now, speaking of next week, let's get to a couple of those games you're referring to, because I wrote them down here. Now, next week's schedule, on Thursday, this is what I was telling you about. On Thursday, number 10 Oklahoma at Baylor, and that is a 7:30 game on Thursday Eastern Standard Time. And
Fox Sports 1?
I think it is. And Baylor's ranked 6th, by the way. I believe that is on Fox Sports 1. And then later that night, number 2 Oregon at number 5 Stanford. That's 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I guess that's got to be an ESPN game,
Probably right? ESPN.
So these games are going to overlap each other, too. Wow. By the way, one's at 7:30, one's at 9.
You want to talk about appointment viewing and a great weekend?
Right.
This usually doesn't happen, where you get the truly great must-watch Thursday matchup.
Right, and when do you get two of them?
These are two must-watch Thursday matchups. A pair of games where you have two top 10 teams opposing each other. Two of them, one in each game, Oregon and even Baylor, that may have a say in the national title picture. Baylor's still undefeated, and they put up points in bunches.
Yes, they do.
You start picking up some legitimate wins in conference, and they will shoot up the rankings as teams fall. Now, do I think they can get all the way to number 1 or 2?
No,
probably not.
And no Big 12 championship game.
But they're going to be pushing. And I think that game in Baylor against Oklahoma will be some football game. And it's really a benchmark game for Baylor for us to see what they really are.
No, absolutely.
Oregon, Stanford, I don't think I have to explain to you much there.
Right.
This is styles making fights. This is the speed, the finesse, the pace of the Oregon Ducks versus the physicality of the Cardinal of Stanford. One side or the other is going to win out. And here's a chance for you to see how Oregon handles physicality. And it'll be a harbinger of things to come against Alabama if that's your BCS championship game matchup. Because Alabama will throw a dose of physicality at Oregon if they get that far that they haven't seen up until that time. Stanford will be a good example of what that physicality is going to be like. So let's see how Oregon handles that, and you'll have some idea how effective they will be against Alabama should it end up going that way.
And last year, Stanford beat them in Eugene, and it was Stanford's pace, and it was Stanford's game. They played their type of game, and they beat Oregon in Eugene.
And we've got to see if Oregon can play that type of game. And when we watch Oregon win, we watch them win shootouts. When we watch them struggle, it's because the pace slows down and the game gets physical. Stanford's one of the better physical teams in the country. Alabama's the best physical team in the country.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Stanford's the next best physical team in the country. If Oregon manages to get by this game, but they have real trouble with the physicality of Stanford, it does not bode well for when and if they were to play Alabama.
No, absolutely. We saw it against not only Stanford last year, but I always bring up when Oregon played Auburn a few years ago in the national title game.
Yes.
That was another low-scoring game. Auburn,
Look at how much trouble they had with, I guess you could call it the physicality of UCLA in the first half of that game.
14-14.
Where there wasn't much offense, and Oregon could not get away from UCLA. And then all of a sudden, the game, all of a sudden Oregon ran away with it. Their offense got going.
Yeah, they can
I give a lot of credit to their defense. It wasn't physical, but it was speedy, and it really limited Brett Hundley.
Right. No, it did.
So we need to see what they can do against a physical team. Stanford's one of the better physical teams in the country. We'll find out how Oregon handles it.
And going back to the Oklahoma-Baylor game, Oklahoma already knocked off undefeated Texas Tech last week in a shootout type of game. That was a strange game. Oklahoma had a lead, then Texas Tech came back, then Oklahoma
started late. There was a delay.
Right, exactly. You had the whole weather delay there.
So all of a sudden you're watching that game. Now the World Series is coming on. You have to move to Fox News Channel to find the rest of the game.
Exactly. So Oklahoma has already...
And Gus was in midseason form. He was screaming at the opening kickoff.
He was. He gets excited.
Well, when you get one of these 38-30 type games like that one was, that means a lot of points are scored. That's a lot of Gus Johnson screaming.
That is, and he's good at that. I remember when he used to do the Knicks games, he used to go crazy with the Knicks.
Well, watch him in an NCAA tournament.
Oh, yeah, he goes nuts with that.
And I mean, I'm not a Gus guy. I got to be honest with you. There's too much screaming. There are two announcers I don't particularly care for. It's him and Kevin Harlan. Right. Kevin Harlan, he'll do one of the TNT games tonight. And it'll be 2-0, and he'll be screaming at the top of his lungs at 10:30, close to 11 o'clock as the Clippers take on the Lakers.
Tonight, by the way, the NBA starts tonight.
And it'll be 2-0.
Right. Do you like Vern Lundquist?
I do. I think he's a pro. He might be losing a little something off his fastball, pushing 80.
Right.
But I like the understated nature of Vern Lundquist.
Okay.
I always liked Keith Jackson. I always liked another Big 12, old Big 8, old Southwest Conference guy, Ron Franklin. He had some trouble with some comments that he made, but Ron Franklin is a terrific understated announcer. Mike Patrick's another guy I like. These are not all the household name guys.
Ron Franklin.
Ron Thulin is another guy I like. A lot of these guys that came from the Southwest, Ron Thulin, Ron Franklin, these are guys that I always thought were very, very solid announcers that let the game take center stage, knew their sports, did their homework. They were real, real solid pros. Mike Patrick's another one of those guys. They can do basketball. They can do football on both the pro and college level. These are good announcers.
Do you like Nessler?
I like Brad Nessler. Brad's a pro.
You like him.
Brad's a pro.
You like Nessler. So we have next Thursday, we have the Oklahoma-Baylor game, and then Oregon-Stanford, and they overlap, so get your 2 TVs ready.
Well, that's one where I either have to be out someplace where TVs are in close proximity, or I have to sit in the cave. I have to sit in the studio, and I got to watch, I got to work.
And I'll tell you, Stanford has a loss, and they're still number 5. I mean, and they lost to Utah, and Utah, by the way, is 4-4. 1-4 in the conference. The only win they have in the conference is against Stanford. Are you kidding me?
Stanford's one of these teams that engenders that kind of respect now.
Yeah.
They lose, they don't fall that much, and as they keep winning, they keep climbing.
Stanford, they get a few breaks. They're not out of this national championship.
They need a lot of breaks because you need a lot of teams in front of them to lose.
But they're not out of it.
I don't know. Here's a question I'll ask you. could one-loss Stanford pass one-loss Oregon and one-loss Florida State and one-loss Ohio State?
Well, they could, if they beat Oregon, they could definitely pass them because they would have beaten them.
And their losses later.
Right.
Now, if Oregon's losses,
one loss Ohio State, I think they would pass because the Big Ten is so weak.
Can they? Here's a better question.
I
should ask: can they pass undefeated Ohio State, who's played nobody?
I would think they won't. I just don't think that's going to happen. Yeah.
You realize because Stanford lost early, if Oregon's loss happens to come to Stanford will pass them.
Right.
If Florida State loses later, Stanford will pass them.
No, right? You know, in college football, it's when
it's
when
not
you
so
lose.
much if you lose; it's when you lose.
When you lose, you lose that first game of the year, you can catch up. You lose the last game of the year, it's not.
But
happening.
I think there's questions, and you could make a case for one-loss Stanford moving ahead of undefeated Ohio State.
No,
because they're right behind them in the polls, and the computer will help one-loss Stanford a lot because Ohio State hasn't played anybody.
No, they haven't.
And that's not going to change. So I'd be very intrigued to see Stanford picks off Oregon, which puts Oregon behind Stanford without any ability to pass them, because you're not going to pass the team you lost to.
No, absolutely not.
And then if Florida State loses somewhere, it's going to be a fairly bad loss.
Yes.
Right? You know, even if it's Miami, any loss that they have going forward would be a bad loss.
No, absolutely.
And it would be later than Stanford. So it would probably put them behind Stanford as well. The question is, and I don't think Ohio State's losing.
No,
I
don't. I mean, they may have to play Michigan twice, or Michigan.
They play Michigan 6 times. I don't think
that. Maybe Michigan State in the Big Ten championship.
And they're not losing any of those.
Okay.
I just don't believe so. So to me, the question becomes: could one-loss Stanford pass undefeated Ohio State?
Oh my!
Give it some thought.
Imagine that in Columbus if that happened. They would.
I mean, I would have to flesh this out a lot more with the Brad Edwards of the world, the Jerry Palms. I'll actually get Jerry Palm on the phone next week. I'm on the show, and we'll talk about those possibilities as it starts to unfold.
That would be 2 years in a row. Ohio State would go undefeated, and then would.
Well, once was their own fault.
I know, but still. Yeah.
I didn't put them on sanctions. They put themselves on sanctions.
Now, also next week, so we went through the Thursday games next week. The big Saturday game next week.
Is that to be determined, to be announced as far as the time? Have they set the time yet? Is it 3:30 or is it to be announced?
You're talking about LSU, Alabama?
Yes.
I do not think they've set a time. I'm personally saying they're going to move that game to 8 o'clock.
They could.
I mean, you got number 13 LSU at number 1 Alabama. To me, that's a prime time.
Now, was there an 8 o'clock ABC game, or did they have a race Saturday night?
Yeah, that I am not sure about, but I would almost guarantee that they're going to move that game to 8 o'clock. I would think. Plus, you got the other 2 big games on Thursday. I would think they're going to want this game 8 o'clock prime time, even if CBS has it, which they do, I guess. Right?
CBS has that game,
right?
So they usually, every once in a while, they'll move this game.
I think they're going to move this one
to 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And they'll call it the Game of the Century Part 9 million.
Right. I think
they
called
could move this. And a lot of times it also depends on what ABC's got going.
Right.
I think that the NASCAR season's coming to a close. I don't know if they have a race on Saturday night or Sunday.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Because if they have a race on Saturday night, that would be on ABC. If the race is on Sunday, there'll be a game on ABC at 8 o'clock. What it is, I don't know.
I would guess, if I had to venture a guess, because I think when I checked it said to be determined.
That means they're going to move it.
I would guess they're going to definitely move it. This game has become the game the last few years. Now, LSU's got a couple of losses, but it's still must-watch TV. You got number 1 Alabama, LSU, these 2 teams.
But it's a must-watch college football Thursday as well. I haven't said that in a long time around these parts.
When have you ever had 2 games of this magnitude on Thursday? I can't remember it.
When you have a fledgling network, and I like Fox Sports 1, and they have that Big 12 package.
Right.
It's an interesting way to make a stab and make some noise.
No, so you got LSU, Alabama. I always love the LSU, Alabama.
It's a great game.
Yeah, that's a great game every year.
The Mad Hatter versus Nick Saban's always a fun coaching matchup.
Absolutely. Now, there are 8 undefeated teams right now. You got Alabama, Oregon, Florida State, Ohio State, Baylor, Miami, Fresno State, and Northern Illinois right now.
Right, take Fresno State and Northern Illinois out of the mix, and don't play anything.
I'm taking 3 of them out. Take Northern Illinois, Fresno out, and Fresno, by the way, escaped last week against San Diego State.
Yeah, they needed overtime against. Well, San Diego State's turned around their season, but they're still not that good.
Let's take Miami out of the equation too,
because you think they're going to fall.
Oh, I think they're going to fall.
That's fair enough.
In a big way.
That's fair enough.
So you have basically 5 undefeated teams here that have a shot at getting to this national title game. You want to go through their schedules real quick with me?
Sure,
Right here?
I'm here.
Let's start with Baylor. Here's who Baylor has left. We just talked about the game against Oklahoma. They're home for that game on the Thursday night. Then the week after, they play Texas Tech in Dallas. That's a neutral site game. Interesting game there.
Jerry Jones Palace.
Right. Then they go to Oklahoma State. Interesting.
Oklahoma State's having quarterback problems. Their defense, for the first time that I can remember, is their calling card.
Yeah, Oklahoma State, I think, plays Texas Tech this week. Interesting to see how Tech bounces back after the loss. So they play at Oklahoma State there, then at TCU. TCU's not any good. Texas just drubbed them. And then finally, Baylor closes the year home for Texas. And Texas is 6-2 somehow.
But they're Jekyll and Hyde. I don't know what to expect out of Texas.
Yeah.
Just when you think they're dead and buried, they're not.
And remember, no Big 12 title game. So out of those games, do you think Baylor loses a game? Let me go through it again with you. Home for Oklahoma, Texas Tech in Dallas, at Oklahoma State, at TCU, home for Texas.
The only one I think they could lose is Oklahoma.
You do?
I don't think they're going to lose at home to Texas. Tech is a mirror image of Baylor. Baylor's just better at it under our
And you're not high on Oak State.
Oak State's got quarterback issues, and you can't beat Baylor if you have quarterback issues, and we've talked about TCU and their quarterback
Baylor
issues.
did struggle at Kansas State this year. They won that game, what was it, 35-25?
They struggle sometime, man.
Right, they did struggle that game. They didn't look. That was probably one of the better teams they played this
Now,
year.
here's the problem for Baylor. They're not... I don't think they have enough schedule. Big 12's better than Big 10. But I don't know, and they start all the human polls below everybody else that we're talking about.
To me,
I don't know that they can leapfrog anybody
No.
if there's more than one undefeated team. I think based on who we've left in this mix, they're going to be the last of those undefeated teams.
yeah, Baylor to me needs everyone basically to lose in front
Right,
of them.
everybody. They need one team to remain undefeated, and them. They need
Right.
to be one of two undefeated teams, or the only undefeated team. Otherwise, they're on the outside.
And they
looking
don't
in.
get that extra Big 12 title game, which could, maybe...
They don't get it. Yeah, they don't have as many chances to make a case.
Right,
It's a fair
so,
statement.
so that's Baylor's schedule. Let's go to Ohio State's schedule. At Purdue this week, we know the deal there. At Illinois, yeah. Home for Indiana. Here's your chance to pick Indiana.
They ain't that good.
Okay.
I said they're improving. I didn't say they were that good.
At Michigan in the Big House, big rivalry. And then the Big Ten title game, which right now would be against Michigan State, I believe. I think right now. So,
No. There's no loss on that schedule.
You, earlier in the season, said Indiana, you were going to pick them in a big upset game.
It ain't that upset game.
And you don't give Michigan a chance in the Big House. And,
No.
and Michigan State in the Big Ten. No.
No.
So you think Ohio State is going undefeated?
Yes.
Okay, there we go with that. Florida State, here's their schedule. Home for Miami. At Wake Forest. Home for Syracuse. Home for Idaho. Yes, let me say it again. Home for Idaho. What's the score of that going to get? I mean, what's it going to be, 90-0? How is Idaho going to compete
Well,
with
they
Florida
come and
State?
collect $400,000 for the athletic program and leave.
Oh, that's going to be an ugly game. And then at Florida, which has turned into that's going to be a bad game too.
Because Florida's
awful.
all banged up.
And then you have the ACC title game, which will either be Va-Tech, Miami, Georgia Tech,
baby.
I mean, those are all teams Florida State's going to drub. I mean, I don't see Florida State losing a game here.
I don't either.
I mean, I think Ohio State's schedule is tougher. I think going to Michigan is tougher than anything.
Most of Florida's heavy lifting is already behind them.
Right, yeah.
So take care of Miami, run the table, and I don't see a loss on that schedule.
All right, so there we go. So you have Ohio State going undefeated, Florida State going undefeated, and Baylor possibly losing to Oklahoma. We got to get back to that next week. All right, Oregon's schedule. At Stanford, home for Utah. Now, they're home in Eugene for Utah. They're not up in Utah.
Right, so you're not worried about them playing Utah and Utah.
Right, exactly. Home for Utah. At Arizona. Arizona's not bad.
Right.
They're not on the level of Oregon, but they're not bad. The Civil War game against Oregon State. And then the Pac-12 title game possibly against the Arizona State Sun Devils, who I would give no chance there because that game, the Pac-12 title game is hosted by the best team, which would be in Eugene and Arizona
And
State.
obviously, you got two teams that are mirror image of each other. They're fast break, finesse oriented, high octane teams. Which one of them's better at it?
Oh,
Oregon or Arizona State?
So
I'll let you answer that question for yourself.
Now, Oregon definitely has a better schedule than Florida State, Ohio State, Baylor. Do you see Oregon losing a game here? I mean, they definitely.
I think they could lose to Stanford.
Right.
I'm not necessarily saying they will, but I certainly think they could. I think the Civil War will be tougher than you think. Is that in Eugene or in Corvallis?
I think that is in Eugene.
I mean, there's losable games on that schedule.
How about at Arizona with our buddy who used to coach West Virginia and Michigan and
Rich Rodriguez.
Right, who was a disaster at Michigan. Should have stayed at West Virginia. He had a nice little niche there.
In a word, no.
By the way, West Virginia's program's falling apart.
There are losable games on that Oregon schedule. I'm not sure they'll lose any of them, but there are losable games on that schedule. So you
definitely think they have the best shot of losing from the teams I just mentioned?
Yeah, I would say so.
All right, now here's Alabama, by the way. Home for LSU.
They could lose that game.
At Mississippi State.
They're not going to lose that one.
Chattanooga.
Well, there's your second payoff game of the year. We talked about this. I was shocked that they had two of those payoff games.
Chattanooga at Auburn. Now that's turning
into the Iron Bowl. That's going to be a tough game.
And Auburn is better than we thought this year. They're playing some good football, Auburn, and that is a gigantic rivalry. And then they will be in the SEC title game against Missouri or possibly, and this is where South Carolina comes in, South Carolina is not out of this. South Carolina is a game behind Missouri, and they beat Missouri. Now, if South Carolina wins the rest of their games,
and Missouri loses one, gets picked off along the way.
South Carolina is going to go to the SEC title game.
Well, then that'll be an easy win for Alabama.
Now, let me give you, on that same note, Missouri and South Carolina's schedule to see who goes. Missouri's home for Tennessee, at Kentucky, at Ole Miss, not easy, home for Texas A&M. So those last two games, not easy.
They could certainly lose one of those.
South Carolina, home for Mississippi State, home for Florida, home for Coastal Carolina, and then home for Clemson. And the Clemson game is not a conference game, and neither is the Coastal Carolina game. South Carolina is going to win their next two SEC games.
They'll probably run the table in the conference.
They may lose to Clemson. We'll get to that
right,
at the
end
of the
day. That's unimportant.
If Missouri loses at Ole Miss or to Texas A&M, South Carolina could make the SEC title games. And our buddy emailed me and he said, not only is that going to happen, but once they get there, they're going to beat Alabama. Is what he said.
What is he smoking? And whatever it is, tell him to send some here. And I was doing some research, so I want to have a little fun. You know, obviously this is a poor imitation of a South Carolina Gamecock, but it is nonetheless. So obviously, since the Gamecock's mascot nickname is Cocky,
he is.
I brought some Cocky.
He is.
There it is.
I was right.
Cocky.
There you go. Right in there. You got to put it right in there.
There you go. Here you go. You got Cocky, and they both look remarkably alike.
Now, do you think? No. Do you think South Carolina is going to win the next two SEC games, Mississippi State, Florida?
Yes.
Do you think Missouri loses to either Ole Miss, Texas A&M? Do you think they lose another game?
They could.
So you think South Carolina could make this title?
Oh,
game?
yeah. Oh, there's a chance. You know, A&M is never easy. They can put up points in bunches. Nobody stops them from putting up points. They just don't stop anybody from putting up points. So when you play Texas A&M, you're in a shootout. Who fires more good shots? And Ole Miss at home is never easy.
Now, back to Alabama.
There's losable games on that schedule.
You think they could lose to LSU?
They could. I don't think they will, but they could.
Auburn, you think so?
They could, but I don't think they will.
You don't think if they play South Carolina, they're going to lose to them? What about Missouri?
No.
No, okay.
In a word, no.
Now, whose schedule do you think is tougher, Alabama's or Oregon's? It's pretty close. I mean, it's pretty close. You got at Stanford up here, at Arizona.
I'll say LSU and Stanford are kind of a wash.
Okay.
Oregon State, Auburn are a wash.
Now remember, Oregon State is home in Eugene. At Auburn is never easy.
Yeah. I think they're comparable. I'd say they're very even because Oregon has higher ranked opponents. Alabama has similar quality opponents. One's at home, one's on the road. You know, those two schedules are really splitting hairs, but they're both very tough schedules, and they both have losable games on that schedule.
And you know Florida State is sitting there, and they're going to be rooting for Stanford big time against Oregon.
All they need is one of those two teams in front of them to lose. Ohio State's not passing them.
No.
Baylor's not passing them. So what they do They have an easy schedule
Oh,
the
yeah.
rest of the way.
They're gonna win
What
them.
they do is win. It's kind of a win and wait thing.
Yeah.
It's win and wait. Because when you look at the difference between Florida State's schedule and Oregon's schedule, you can't see any way that Florida State passes them without Oregon losing.
No.
So if you're Florida State, win and wait. Hope for an Oregon and or Alabama loss, and you're in the BCS championship game. Failing that, you're going to the Orange Bowl, I guess. Right? Is it the Orange Bowl still?
Yeah, I think so.
It's the Orange Bowl. Probably. Actually, there'll be a choice, but most likely the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, so the good news for Florida State is Oregon and Alabama do have a lot of tough games.
They have a lot of pitfalls and a lot of potential spots that they could get upended on their schedules.
No.
Whether they will or not remains to be seen, but I think there's definitely chances.
No, absolutely. So if you're Florida State, you are kind of hopeful here, and the teams that have the weak schedules are behind you, so that's okay.
And those teams aren't going to pass you. They can stay undefeated, but undefeated Ohio State's not passing anybody else in front of them that's undefeated, and undefeated Baylor's not passing anybody that's undefeated in front of them.
Absolutely.
Maybe with the exception of Ohio State. But I don't think that'll happen because of the human polls. I don't think anybody is going to vote for Baylor and rank them higher than Ohio State. So the human polls save Ohio State from the indignity, as it were, of being ranked below Baylor if both teams are undefeated.
No, absolutely. So this week, very light college football week, very light. I mean, Miami could save it if they somehow at least stay in the game. I'm hoping they at least just hang in there, not even win it. That would save the day for them.
Yeah, it would.
If they get blown out, I think we're going to have a lost week in college football because we're going to have blowout city all over. Plus, some of the big teams, like I said, 6 of the top 13 not playing.
Right.
Not playing. I mean, that's bad. I mean, but we're going to follow it up next week, starting early on Thursday with a big, I would call it a doubleheader, even though the games are going to overlap. And then,
we'll still call it a double dip. Go someplace.
Right.
Hey, for those of you that aren't in the business like we are and have studios set up where we've got monitors all over the place, and I have the 3 TVs and the whole setup and the DVRs. We don't expect everybody to have that. Go to your local watering hole, go to a cigar club, go someplace with multiple TVs. Get these ball games on side by side and watch them.
No, absolutely.
They're going to be appointment viewing and terrific.
And then it culminates with the big Saturday LSU Alabama, which has turned into like an epic game every year.
It really is. It's the game of the century.
Yeah,
every year.
Every single year, it's like must-watch TV, and these two teams really slug it out with each other. And I love the way these two teams play. I mean, I like the way they just play. I love Alabama's fundamentals, and they're actually a team that actually plays defense, and they actually tackle well, which is like a lost art now. Not only a pro,
but
and
now they have the high-octane offense with the elite quarterback in A.J. McCarron to go with. I mean, you look at that Alabama football team, and you talked about the defense. And they started out a little slow on defense. They've really picked it up, and they've become truly one of the elite defensive teams in America. And in many ways, as you said, a throwback in college football to where it's all high-flying, offensive-oriented teams. Alabama can seriously shut you down on defense.
No,
like
absolutely.
few teams in America. But you look at that offense, and they bring something that they haven't even brought in years where they were winning national titles, like recent vintage. They bring an elite college quarterback and a guy that will play in some form on Sundays in A.J. McCarron. They bring Amari Cooper to lead a terrific wide receiver corps. They reload on the offensive line. That offensive line is probably better than either of those offensive lines we watched last night in the Monday night game. I throw that in there as well.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
And then you have a stable of running backs led by T.J. Yeldon.
St. Louis should have won that game last night, by the way, the Rams. Oh,
yes, they should have, but Kellen Clements, the quarterback.
Bad teams
might as well have had Clarence Clements play.
Bad teams always find a way to lose, is
exactly.
my little story.
And that's the truth.
Yeah.
And when you don't finish drives, you settle for field goals, you lose a lot of football. That's the realities of the situation.
They had Seattle ripe for the picking last night.
Absolutely. So when you look at Alabama, they can hit you in the mouth, and then they can go and score point for point with you like they did against Texas A&M. And win those games too.
See,
those are hard football teams to stop.
Yeah. I'm hoping for, and I like Oregon. I told you I like Oregon. I usually pick them every week.
They like you too.
I want to see Alabama play Florida State.
Okay.
Because I think Florida State
you might get your wish.
No,
you might get your wish just because of how many potential pitfalls there are in that Oregon schedule. If you think Stanford's going to be easy, it's not.
No, not.
They're going to try and punch. They're going to try and punch Oregon in the mouth, and we'll see how it goes.
See, I think Florida State's the second best team, and I think they'd have a shot. Alabama would be favored. I'd give Florida State a shot as well as they're playing now.
Yeah.
to maybe upset Alabama in that game. You see, Oregon, I'm not sold on yet.
See, I don't think anybody can upset Alabama. I really don't. You look at that schedule. You ask me, are there losable games on it? Yeah, there are.
Yeah.
Do I think they're going to lose any of them?
No.
I don't believe they're going to lose any. I think they're that good.
What do you think is a tougher game, home for LSU or at Auburn?
I'll say at Auburn.
Me too.
Just because they're both rivalry games, but Auburn, Alabama, Iron Bowl is a bigger rivalry.
In Auburn, that place.
In Auburn, where it's tough.
It's a madhouse there.
LSU is good offensively, and they're probably the equal of Alabama on offense, and they have a lot of weapons in their own.
2 games on the road already this year, LSU.
They've lost on the road, and defensively, they don't bring it.
No, which is shocking.
The way Alabama brings it this year, and the way LSU teams have brought it in years past. So for me, I think Alabama's just a better group, and playing in Tuscaloosa, that gives them a decisive edge in that football game. Wait till you see what the number is when it comes out next week. It won't be as close as you think.
Yeah, I actually agree.
It's probably going to be a double-digit number.
I think you're right. I was going to say about 10 points.
I think you're right on the
We'll see, but it should be a fun week next week if we can get through this week. Let's hope for Miami this week.
Do some drinking this week.
Let's hope Miami does something this week.
Here's a week where everybody out there, because, a lot of times what we do to our girls is we leave them and we make them football widows. And we do. I do it, you do it. I try to make up for it. But
well, you said your girlfriend is a big Giant fan.
She's a big Giant fan, so Sunday, but she's not that into college football.
And she likes basketball.
And she's a Knick fan. I brought, she started to get into this stuff, and she knows the games. I even got her playing fantasy football. She has her own fantasy football team.
I hear wedding bells now.
So I've kind of got her, on the right path. But a lot of us, she's not that into the college football stuff, and I kind of make her a football widow a little bit on Saturday. So here's a good week. It's going to be a nice weather weekend here in the Northeast. So if you're making your girl a football widow on Saturday during college football season, this is a lousy slate of games. Go do something nice with your girl this week. I know I'm going to on Saturday. I'll check in, because that's what they pay me to do, and I'll watch these games, and I'll DVR some stuff, and I'll catch up later.
Right.
But it's a good week where I don't have to sit necessarily on the couch or in the office or at the lounge or wherever and watch all these games. So I'm going to give my girl a break and give her some time on Saturday.
And Saturday, believe it or not, clocks go back an hour, so you get an extra hour.
I like that because I can DVR stuff. And
Thursday, are you doing anything for Halloween? You're dressing up, right? You and your girlfriend are dressing up.
I'm dressing up as a South Carolina Gamecock mascot, and I'm going to be a big turd.
And
cocky. I'm going to call myself Cocky.
Friday is my birthday.
Oh, wow.
So I got Halloween, birthday, and the clocks go back.
And the clocks go back.
And a bad college
football.
football.
And a quasi week off from college football where you don't have all this appointment viewing and you can chill.
Speaking of bad days to watch games, how about tonight? No World Series tonight. By the way, you like the Cardinals in 6. Would you like to change that?
I like Cardinals in 7.
Cardinals in 7. Okay, there we go.
I don't like their chances now, but
no World Series tonight. No football. Hockey, it's too early. I mean,
opening night of the NBA is always fun.
We got NBA.
You got 2 marquee matchups, and if you have the NBA package, you can catch Orlando and Indiana.
They may even give you the free one for the first week.
I think Orlando's a very intriguing young team that has a shot to make the playoffs in the East, and I think it's a far improved East.
I like
and Indiana's on that route, Mount Rushmore in the Eastern Conference, that Big Four: Brooklyn, Indiana, Miami, and Chicago.
Indiana, can Granger please get healthy? I mean,
he's going to sit for the first 3 weeks. Doesn't matter.
And like you said,
it's the interminable 82-game regular season.
Right.
So if he's back for January and they get him ingrained into the lineup and get him 100%, he'll have fresh legs come the playoffs. Because the guy you're going to see a lot of is Chris Copeland.
Right, yeah.
He's going to be some instant offense off of that bench, something they didn't have last year, provided he plays some defense. He played enough defense to get on the floor for the Knicks. He was able to defend multiple positions because of his size. But for a second unit that was completely devoid of scoring, he will light it up for them.
And, of course, the Bulls and the Heat are already woofing at each other, already going at it in the papers. I really hope we don't see the Heat again win it this year. I can't take it. I can't take another Heat title. They were beat last year by the Spurs in that Game 6, and the Spurs let that championship
I wonder if the Spurs have one more run in them.
I don't know. It's asking
You know,
a lot.
I mean, Pat Williams was inclined to think so. Today on my radio show, I spoke to Pat Williams, the senior vice president of the Orlando Magic. He's been a GM for both the Orlando Magic and the Philadelphia 76ers. And he thinks there's another run in them.
You can never discount them.
The team he thinks may take a step back is Oklahoma City, which I'm inclined to agree with. But if they can get some center play, if Steven Adams is the real deal, and he looked like the real deal in preseason and in the summer league, and they don't have to play Kendrick Perkins, who I still haven't figured out why they haven't amnestied, except now it's the final year of that deal, so now the expiring contract is worth something. If they can get some rebounding and scoring out of the center position, they may be able to stay where they've been. If not, I think there's some erosion on that team, and they're taking a step back.
You got Westbrook coming off an injury, of course, and is Ibaka ever going to blossom into a really good player?
See, I like Serge Ibaka very much,
him,
but I think when people ask, is he going to blossom, you're asking him to be something more than he is. He's a number 3 option.
They gave him a big contract, though. And a matter of fact, in a lot of ways,
they have a big contract to rebound and block shots. And if you're looking for him to be a 22-point-a-night scorer, that's not what he is.
Do you think they should have kept Harden over Ibaka?
They weren't even thinking that way because they didn't have the size. They had to keep Serge Ibaka, number 1. Number 2, they didn't think there was enough shots to go around for Durant, Westbrook, and Harden.
Now, Harden would come off the bench sometimes, but still...
He came off the bench all the time. He was their 6th man, but he was playing in crunch time.
Your point's well taken.
But there wasn't... The James Harden we see in Houston was never the James Harden you were going to see in Oklahoma City just because there weren't that many shots.
Let me ask it another way. Do you think they should have wrote it out with him one more year? Do you think they pulled the trigger on that trade too soon and let him play with them 1 year?
It was about getting draft picks for Harden and clearing cap space. Maybe you're right, but what I'm telling you is he moves to Houston, he becomes the lead dog, and he becomes that star. He was never going to be considered that star on that level in Oklahoma City. He was a quality third banana who you said, wow, this guy, man, he can hit the 3, he can defend the backcourt, the small forward position, he can pass, he can facilitate offense. You said, boy, it's a nice player. And that's what you thought he was, a real nice player. But you were never going to think of him more than that in Oklahoma City because the opportunity to jack up 20 shots a night just wasn't there.
What do you think of Houston with Dwight Howard, who I'm a Laker fan?
I think the potential there is limitless. I mean, you look at that young team, you've got Dwight Howard. You've got a lot of athleticism, a lot of ability to score the basketball, a lot of ability to pick it up and put it down. My question is, how much defense can they play? When the game slows down, do they have answers? Can Dwight Howard fit into that mix? And I think they're a lot better basketball team in January than they are in November. So you're going to see some struggles in the early going.
And in the late night game tonight, we have the Clippers and the Lakers. My Lakers are in all sorts of trouble. I mean, no Kobe Bryant. They're going to have.
You know what? Get in the lottery. And the 2014,
this is the year to do it.
2014 NBA draft, like the 2014 NFL draft, is one for the ages. Not only is it deep, and can you get help in the first and second rounds, you can get somebody at the back end of that lottery that could be a player for the ages.
So you think my Lakers are that bad they don't even make the playoffs in the West?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. It's a deep West.
It is.
I mean, I think there's very good teams that aren't going to make the playoffs because I think there's some of these teams that were on the outside looking in last year that could make some noise.
So you think the Clippers take the next step?
I'm not enamored with the Clippers. I think they have terrific athletes on that basketball team. I don't know if they have terrific basketball players. And I really believe for them to take the next step, DeAndre Jordan and, more importantly, Blake Griffin have to become better basketball players than they are athletes. Right now, they're better athletes than they are basketball players. And when they're forced to play basketball against equally talented big men, they get exposed. Look what Memphis did to them in the playoffs. I was just going to
bring up Memphis, yeah.
Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol really throttled DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin. And honestly, when you look at Marc Gasol and Zach Randolph, they're far better basketball players than Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin are better athletes.
Right.
But the basketball players won. Because Zach Randolph can't jump over a phone book.
No.
But he can flat out play some basketball.
Right.
Blake Griffin can jump over a car. I'm not sure how much basketball he can play.
There you go. And of course, the NHL, your Rangers are finally back at home at the Garden last
Yes,
night.
the beautiful renovated Madison Square Garden.
Looks really good.
It looks gorgeous. Unfortunately, the team they're putting on the ice, not so good.
No, but that's their first home game the whole month. They were on the road the whole month of October,
Yes.
so they finally get home.
Trying to do the touch-ups, work the punch list, fill in the last spackle.
Right.
And now we get a beautiful, renovated, grandiose Madison Square Garden, baby.
There you go. Okay, so that wraps up.
I thought you said I had a gift coming.
College football. Did I say that today?
Did South Carolina send me a gift? Or
No,
he just insulted me.
He just had that one
Yeah,
little thing where they were going to make the SEC championship game, and once they
Are you high?
Once they beat Alabama, he plans on sending you something. I guess it's going to be some championship shirt, being you said they're never going to win a championship. So I think that's where we're
Well, all
headed.
right, okay. Well, that'll be fun. And if they win that, I'll take my dose of humble pie and I'll wear the shirt with
Long way
pride.
to go to get that point.
Yeah. If he buys it, then they don't win it. I'll send it. We'll burn it on the air.
There you
but
go.
like I said, I got Cocky the mascot,
And you got
and
that.
I got Cocky.
That looks like a pretzel, by the way.
Yeah, it's fake poo, but I thought it looked so much like Cocky the mascot. I figured I'd bring it today, and I wasn't sure which one was which.
Okay, so before you take us to the end here, tomorrow, you guys, NFL picks, wall-to-wall NFL. We're going to touch on the World Series, touch a little bit on the NBA, the NHL, all that kind of stuff. So I will be back with you guys tomorrow to do all that. Joe will take us to the end here. Tell them where they can find you and sign off.
Absolutely. You can find me on Sirius Satellite Radio via the Sports Byline Broadcast Network. It's 8 to 10 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. You can check the Sports Byline website at www.sportsbyline.com to check for a local affiliate in your area. If you don't have one and you don't have a Sirius XM radio, click on the Listen Live link, and there we are each and every morning, Monday through Friday, 8 to 10. You can also catch me on the WPIX Morning News, usually on the day of and the day after a New York Giant and or a New York Jet Monday or Thursday night football game. And those segments typically are sometime around 6:45 Eastern Time. For those of you that have cable television all over the country, WPIX is one of those superstations, so especially if you're here on the East Coast, it's pretty likely you can look me up there.
There you go. There's where you can find Joe. I'll be back with you guys tomorrow. NFL picks. You guys enjoy the games tonight if you can find some. It's an NBA night, I guess. Are you doing a dog night tonight?
It's dog night.
Dog
Tuesday
night,
night
yeah.
is dog night, but we will have it. We will have the game on. We will bring out the laptop computer. We'll have the NBA games
Gotcha.
on. The dog will run around. Hopefully Tiger doesn't knock it over. But we are doing dog night, cigars, a couple of Beck's Dark. But we will be watching the NBA. I'll probably go to sleep at some point during the second game, as in order to get ready for an 8 a.m. Eastern Time show, you got to get up pretty early in the morning.
There you go. You guys, I'll talk to you tomorrow. NFL picks.